The Redmi Note 5 Pro has to be one of our most favorite phones released in 2018, and we actually compare it to a lot of other phones. You can see those videos on our YouTube channel. We compare it to the OPPO F7, the Nokia 7 Plus, the Honor 9 Lite, the Huawei P20 Lite, also the Realme 1 and the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 4GB RAM variant. But the Redmi Note 5 Pro stood as the king with the crown on its head. But today we have the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 6GB RAM variant with improved cameras. So will this phone be finally able to dethrone the Redmi Note 5 Pro to become the best smartphone camera under 20,000? Well, let's find out. Hey, this is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and this is our full camera comparison of the Redmi Note 5 Pro versus the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. Before jumping into the video, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, I don't know what the hell you're doing, because you should do it right now, and also click the bell icon right next to it so that you get notified for all these cool tech videos that we put out. Now, before we get into the actual camera comparison, I'll let you take a look at the specifications of the Redmi Note 5 Pro and the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. You can pause the video and take a look at the specs all you want, but I'm not going to wait for you, so let's jump into this comparison. Now, for the beginning of this comparison, we'll start with this wide shot. The sky was very beautiful and it was a good day to click pictures for this comparison, but yes, getting into these pictures, the first thing I see from a distance is the color of the sky, and I'm sure you can see that too. Now, the Redmi Note 5 Pro's sky definitely looks more saturated and more pleasing to the eyes. But the sky in Asus Zenfone's picture is very close to the actual color of the sky at the time of shooting. What this means is that while Redmi Note 5 Pro goes for a saturated, pleasing look, the Zenfone pushes out a neutral look that a lot of enthusiasts might prefer. Now, zooming in to the top part of the building, we see that the Redmi Note 5 Pro has a way better noise management here than the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. And while Asus has preserved a lot more detail, it's just too noisy for me to pick. For all these reasons and the fact that Redmi has managed to keep the details in control at most places, I'll pick the Redmi Note 5 Pro as my winner for this one. Now, going into HDR, this was definitely a good setting to also test out the HDR capabilities of these phones. We did that. Here things become a little more interesting. The Redmi Note 5 Pro, like always, does a very subtle job and brings the highlights down slightly and doesn't really go into the shadows that much. Asus, on the other hand, quite honestly goes very strong on the HDR, and you can clearly see the difference. The highlights were well preserved even without HDR, but the shadows have just been brought out so well without looking extremely unnatural. So when purely comparing the HDR modes on these two phones, I'd pick the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 just because it does what it says: improve dynamic range. Now, before taking a portrait shots, I wanted to test out a human subject against such a fairly bright background to see how both these phones would handle it, and we have our lovely Irshad for that. And although it might not seem like that, it's very close. Let me explain. The Redmi Note 5 Pro definitely takes a better picture and has been able to expose the background and the subject very well. But if you zoom into the picture, you'll see that Asus has managed to preserve way more details than the Redmi Note 5 Pro, which just has me excited. The details on the Redmi Note 5 Pro are softer in comparison to Asus. So before I tell you my winner, I have to say that both these images have gotten different parts of the picture right. The Redmi takes an overall good looking picture, exposing all the areas well, even without turning on HDR. But while the Zenfone Max Pro M1 has blown the background completely out, it has gotten the subject of the image, which is Irshad, very well. So for the people who care deeply about details and want their camera to stay true to the natural colors, the Zenfone is just amazing. But the Redmi Note 5 Pro definitely takes more flaunt-worthy pictures, if I may, and won't need much retouching before posting on social media. So as a consumer, I'd pick the Redmi Note 5 Pro, but the Zenfone is technically more accurate when it comes to shooting regular humans or superhumans like Irshad here. Portrait mode is an area where even more expensive phones don't come close to what the Redmi Note 5 Pro does. So first, let's examine the subject here. Similar results to the last picture, where Redmi had a softer image, slightly softer image with less details, and the Asus impresses with natural colors and more details. But a portrait mode picture is defined by the blurring of the background and how well the subject has been identified and differentiated from the background. Here, Asus has done a good job, but it's just nowhere close to the Redmi Note 5 Pro's image. The edge detection is spot on the Redmi Note 5 Pro, and so is the quality of the background blur, which is again very important. The Asus's bokeh looks very unnatural, which is why I have a clear winner here in the Redmi Note 5 Pro. Coming to selfies, if we can get past the weird expression on my face, I don't know what I was looking at, but the selfies from both these phones have been done very well. But I'm pretty sure that most of you are instantly drawn towards the Redmi Note 5 Pro's image, and rightly so. The colors are pleasing and the image is very well exposed too. Now the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 follows the pattern and takes an equally impressive image, just impressive in a different way. The Zenfone importantly stays very true to the color which is pronounced in my face, and especially in the blue color of the t-shirt. When we come to the details, it's a very patchy game. The Redmi Note 5 Pro has weirdly blotched up details on some parts of the hair, which is very weird, although the beard has been captured beautifully. Now, while the Asus gives us a homogeneous focus on those hairs, it's just not as pleasing or well produced as the Redmi Note 5 Pro, which is hence the winner for my selfies. So now that we've already looked at selfies, let's examine the selfie portrait mode. And since I've already talked about the selfie quality, I'll only talk about the background blur or bokeh. And first, talking about that, we have to look at edge detection again. And I'm impressed by Asus's work here for my selfies. Redmi is known for its edge detection, but Asus has done a very good job. Just look at the hair strands, which is one of the most difficult parts in a selfie portrait, and how well it's been differentiated by Asus. Also, what's more impressive here is how confident Asus is with its bokeh mode, because if you look closely, you'll realize that the Redmi Note 5 Pro's bokeh starts with a light blur and then after a few pixels or so becomes blurrier, which is a safe way to do it. This is how Pixel does it, this is how Xiaomi has been doing it for a long time, and it's just a safe way to take a portrait mode picture, because even if there are a few subjects that have not been differentiated, they'll still remain somewhere in the light blur area, hence not exactly being completely blurred out. Now the Asus is very aggressive here, where it starts the hard blur just as it's differentiated the subject from the background. But that does come with a few glitches that we see here, and purely based on this image, the Redmi Note 5 Pro is my winner here purely because of its accuracy. Now, looking at some daylight close-up shots, a bird's eye view again shows some appealing colors on the Redmi Note 5 Pro's picture, which also has a bit more contrast, which makes it look good. Although I have to say here that the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1's image is the closest to what it actually looked like. Now zooming in, things change quite a bit. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 has done a lovely job here, enough to take its full name, because the colors, the individual strands that you can actually see in this image have been dealt with very well. In comparison, the Redmi Note 5 Pro hasn't been really able to handle the colors well, and it would generally be understandable considering that these colors are not very easy for smartphone cameras to reproduce, but when put up next to the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1's image, I just can't make that argument. So this is again a conflict between a true to life image and a pleasing social media worthy picture that no one would zoom into. It was generally becoming more and more difficult to pick a winner, but in this case, purely because Asus has handled the flowers, the details, the colors and everything very well, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 is my winner. Again, in this next set of images, we have similar results. The Redmi has clicked warmer image, a punchier image, but the Asus just nails the details, the white balance, the color accuracy, and again for daylight close-up shots, I'd have to without a doubt pick the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 over the Redmi Note 5 Pro. There are more images that we can go through, but all of them speak the same story. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 and the Redmi Note 5 Pro are actually handling these images and these pictures in a very different way, in a very different approach. So the Redmi Note 5 Pro is generally clicking more appealing, pleasing, saturated, colorful images, just like Samsung does, like Samsung phones are doing, while the Asus Zenfone Max Pro tries to stay very true to what the actual situation is and hence creating a lot of natural colors. This is very close to what a Samsung versus an iPhone fight has always been. Samsung has always been creating very punchy, colorful, pleasing looking images, and the iPhone has always stayed true to the colors. Now, the only reason I say this is because the competition has been very tight and it's been very difficult for me to pick a winner in each of these images. But these phones are approaching these pictures and these subjects in a very different way, and I just wanted to put it out. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's take a look at some low light images. Now let's take a look at some low light images. Now taking a look at some selfies here, I have a very clear winner and I think you do too. The Redmi Note 5 Pro makes the subject pop even in such low light conditions where the Asus Zenfone Max Pro just struggles. The Zenfone also demonstrates a lot of noise, which the Redmi Note 5 Pro handles quite well and takes this round along with it. Now both these phones also have front flash that definitely boosts the image a bit. They're slightly more detailed and it's just an overall better image, but again, the Redmi Note 5 Pro, since it had a better image to begin with, does a better job in the low light flash area, and in low light selfies and low light selfies with flash, the Redmi Note 5 Pro is a clear winner. Now, taking a look at this product shot in extreme low light, I am as surprised as you are because the Asus has just crushed the Redmi Note 5 Pro here. The noise management is spot on, and even zooming in, you will appreciate how well the Asus Zenfone has taken this picture and kept most of it in detail. Now, looking at this low light wide image, I think you can see here again that the Redmi Note 5 Pro is just crushed by the Asus Zenfone Max Pro because of better noise reduction and a lot more details in the picture. But when shooting a low light image, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 tends to struggle a bit just to keep focus on it. The Redmi Note 5 Pro doesn't do that much, but basically the image that comes out looks clearly better on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. Now moving on to the flash performance, however, the Redmi Note 5 Pro comes out on top, although I'm not fond of taking flash images in low light. So if you're someone who works in a very dark environment, maybe you're Batman or Robin or maybe Alfred, and you just have to work in a dark cave all the time, then the Redmi Note 5 Pro may be better because it has a better flash performance. But purely talking about the camera performance, the camera sensor, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro takes better low light images with the back camera. Now moving towards video, this is an area where the Redmi Note 5 Pro blows the Asus Zenfone out of the waters. It's just more appealing color reproduction, there's EIS which the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 lacks, and the audio too is just clearly better on the Redmi Note 5 Pro. It's crispier and records way more volume than Asus does. When it comes to the video, Redmi Note 5 Pro is, as I said, a clear winner. However, there's one very specific scenario where the Asus Zenfone might just be the better option, and that again is for a very niche crowd. But just hear me out. Since there's no EIS on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro, the video isn't cropped, and you can clearly see when you're comparing the video from the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 and the Redmi Note 5 Pro that the Redmi Note 5 Pro's video is a little cropped in, and that's because the EIS has to work. Now on the Asus, on the other hand, there's no cropping since there's no EIS, and you also get very neutral, natural colors as Asus has been producing for all the images that we saw. What this means is that if you're someone who's an enthusiast who takes a lot of videos from his or her smartphone to edit and edits each and every clip and wants full control and wants the image or the video in the most raw form possible, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 is a very good option. The Redmi Note 5 Pro applies its color signs, applies the EIS, also hence giving a lot of jellying effect at the corners. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro gives out a very raw video, and for someone who likes to edit, wants full control, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 might just be the phone that you're looking for. Now talking about the selfie video, it's no different than the selfie pictures that you saw. The Redmi Note 5 Pro has better audio, better video, and clearly takes better selfie videos when compared to the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. So here I have the Redmi Note 5 Pro and the Asus Zenfone Max Pro, the 6GB RAM version, and this is the footage from the front camera. Both these phones, I think you can take a look at the stability, at the stabilization of both the cameras and the audio quality along with the video quality. So please let me know what you thought, and I'll obviously tell you what I think. Now there's one thing that I can't miss here, which is the camera experience that a lot of people do miss when they're doing camera comparisons, not us. Now talking about the camera shooting experience, the camera app experience, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 severely lacks. They use the Snapdragon camera app, which is not a very mature app, let's just say, and while it has a lot of features, it's just not easy to navigate, hence making it quite a hassle. The MIUI camera app, on the other hand, has had years of R&D and consumer feedback behind it, hence making it a very mature, a very stable and reliable camera app, and hence a very easy experience. Having a good camera app is as important as having a good camera hardware, and that is something that I very much realized when using the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. So this is a place where the Redmi Note 5 Pro has a lot of edge when compared to the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. So now for the conclusion, is the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 better than the Redmi Note 5 Pro? Well, not really. In one word, it was tight and easily one of the hardest camera comparisons I ever had to do. Now that's because Asus and Xiaomi have worked very hard on these smartphone cameras, and that just shows from the pictures and the videos. It's just that they have different approaches. Now the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 takes true to life pictures with very neutral colors. The Asus also has a very color accurate display and is probably aiming for enthusiasts out here. Now the Redmi Note 5 Pro here has a very appealing color science, very saturated, pleasing colors on its images, although a lot of times Asus takes more details in than the Redmi Note 5 Pro. So as I said, it's tight, but my job is to make your life simpler and give you a very simple answer, and I shall do that. The Redmi Note 5 Pro is for the easygoing, for the social media buff, your friend who wants better selfies than any of his or her friends, for the mom and the dad, for your sister, for your friends who just don't want to put a lot of efforts into their pictures, who just want something that they can flaunt to their friends and post on social media. And the Redmi Note 5 Pro is the best phone that you can find for that. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 here is for the enthusiast. It's an enthusiast phone all the way around. It's for someone who wants full control over their pictures or their videos. It's for people for whom the photos in their gallery is just the middle part of the process, and they want to take those pictures to the editing table to make it look the way they want. And if that's you, this is the phone for you. Now to pick the winner for this camera comparison, I'd still pick the Redmi Note 5 Pro. It's still the winner, it's still unbeatable, and there's a very good reason for that. Because when someone comes to me and asks me for an advice to buy a phone with a good camera, the Redmi Note 5 Pro would still be my choice, purely because of the accuracy, the reliability, the good camera app experience, and pictures that they would be able to post to social media right there, right then, basically making it a very consumer-centric phone. So I guess with that, we come to an end of this camera comparison between the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 6GB RAM variant and the Redmi Note 5 Pro. Please let me know what you thought of this comparison in the comment section below. Also subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon right next to it so that you get notified for all these videos that we put out. That's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. This is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and I'll catch you in the next one.